Morning guys, welcome to my new video today. Today I'm going to look at GH, or General Hardness. So this, I believe, is the last of the big kind of major parameters that you need to be aware of and familiar with as a koi keeper. I've covered ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, pH, KH. I believe I've done all the other stuff. So if you haven't seen them already, do check those out if there's anything in there that interests you. And if there's anything else you can think of that you need to know or you'd like to know, just let me know and I'll cover that. But today, yeah, GH, General Hardness. This is kind of, I want to say, less important than a lot of the others, but it's still important. And I say it's less important because generally it's very difficult, very rare that you're outside of an acceptable range with GH. But that said, it is probably one of the most complicated of the lot, to be honest. If you go, you could go in, I could talk all day in massive detail about the chemistry behind it, which I'm not going to do today. I'm going to just simplify it, pull out the stuff that is important and relevant, really. Hopefully not too boring. Okay, so to kick off then, I'm going to step back away from koi for a second. GH, General Hardness, is the one people will be familiar with from household water use. So when people talk about hard water and soft water, this is what they're referring to. So you'll know soft water in the home. Generally when you wash your hands, you have soap, you get a really strong lava forming very readily. And harder water people associate kind of with like a limescale deposit on sort of in the kettle, on the heating element of the kettle, on the hot tap, and you'll see when you wipe down the shower screen, you'll see a white or kind of opaque film. That is from hard water, and that's basically calcium, which is essentially what contributes massively to making water hard. And the calcium, you'll see it more on the hot tap and in the kettle, as I said, because what happens basically is as the water is heated, the calcium in the solution, the water solution, comes out and it basically converts to solid calcium and deposits itself, as I say, on the tap, on the heating element of the kettle, etc. The flip side to the soap analogy, you'll know if you have in a particularly hard water area, sometimes you can really struggle to get the soap to lather up, should I say, not lava, and that's because, again, the calcium in the water reacts with the soap, nullifies the soap effect. So people are kind of familiar with GH from that respect. In terms of your supply water, I can only again apologise to people outside of the UK, but here in the UK there's a very broad range of hardness levels in water because it isn't something that's strictly controlled. You know, water companies don't add or remove things to kind of create a particular hardness level. They will adjust it if it gets to extremes, but generally you get what you get. And the reason for the variation, largely it's because it's based on the geographic area in which you live. If you live in kind of Yorkshire, Wales, sort of rural settings where there's waterfalls, rivers, natural lakes with limestone present, then the limestone kind of acid rain falls on limestone, or should I say rain falls on limestone. It has an acid nature and it breaks down the limestone, carbonic acid basically in rain, breaks down the limestone, and that calcium then that comes off ends up in the water and increases the hardness of the water as the calcium, magnesium, etc. goes up in the water, so too does the hardness. And so in those areas the water tends to be harder. Now where I live, this is quite a built up area, it's not rural at all, there's no rivers, natural lakes and reservoirs, and so my water supply, my source is about a mile away actually, and it's a huge man-made concrete reservoir, and as such there's no opportunity for that water to come into contact with natural rock, natural mineral containing rock, and so the water in those areas tends to be quite soft, and my pH is around 7.4, 7.5. I have quite soft water here, and that's why. So yeah, I'm going on, I'm waffling a bit, but to bring it round now, let's and get back to koi. So GH, we measure GH in the koi pond environment. You can measure it in milligrams per litre. More common is degrees of hardness. Now 1 milligram per litre is the same as 1 ppm, and 1 ppm is the same as 0.05603 degrees hardness. And so you can easily convert between the two depending on what particular unit your test kit works in. Now the range over which koi are happy is broad. Generally speaking, above 60 milligrams per litre is sufficient in terms of providing all the minerals your koi will ever need, and that figure is in all tap water, across the UK, certainly all source water, but as a minimum 60 milligrams per litre, and that's around about 3.6 degrees hardness as a minimum. In terms of a maximum range, it's very high, and it's difficult to say exactly, but generally around 250 milligrams per litre or around 14 degrees hardness is kind of the upper limit in terms of general hardness. 99.9% of people and ponds will fall comfortably within that range, and this is why I sort of suggest it's less important, but it's less important because it's very difficult to be outside of the acceptable range, not less important because being outside of the acceptable range is less of a problem, if that makes sense. Now, in terms of what hardness is better for your koi, a massive subject in itself, and you could talk all day, argue for both extremes being better. Now, to take the example of Japan and the Japanese way of thinking, the Japanese guys tend to favour soft water, so they believe koi develop and grow better in softer water. And as such, as you'll know, mud ponds are used in Japan to grow koi on. And I'll digress just slightly, but a little myth that we seem to have in this country is that mud ponds are good for koi because they contain lots of minerals, because of the mud and mud being full of minerals, etc. This is absolutely, couldn't be further from the truth. The mud ponds in Japan are almost completely void of minerals. The water is very, very soft. And the reason for that is that the soil is practically dead in terms of nutrients. And a little bit of backstory on that: the mud ponds are mud ponds now. In the past, a lot of the mud ponds were paddy fields. Rice was grown in them, and the reason they were used to grow rice is because of this lack of minerals and lack of nutrient in the soil, nothing else would grow. So subsequently, with the change to the way rice is produced and the scale and things, a lot of the rice fields have now been converted to mud ponds, but the soil is still very, very much void of nutrients and minerals, and as such the water in them is very, very soft. And as I said, Japanese swear by softer water for growth and development of koi. Now there's a lot of people also swear by hard water and use clay to increase the minerals, which increases the pH and which makes the water harder, and a lot of people believe that's the way to go. It's very difficult to say what the right answer is. Personally, my personal opinion, I don't blindly follow what happens in Japan without understanding it, and for myself, I'm not one of those people, but generally speaking, most times what goes on in Japan is the way, is the right way. There's no doubt that at all that those guys are the experts, they're at the forefront, and generally they get it right on most all things. So personally, I favour softer water. My pH is about 7.5, which I'm really happy with. As I say, man-made reservoir for source close by, so very low mineral levels, comfortably within the range, but lower, softer water, I prefer that myself. In terms of the impact that hard and soft water will have on your koi, again, it's a long-term thing and it's difficult to sort of show, but generally it's known that Benny, redfish, red on koi, should I say, not red koi, develops stronger, better in soft water. So for example, a kahaku, the red will be stronger, it will develop a lot better in softer water. And conversely, black sumi on koi favours harder water, so develops stronger and better in harder water. So as you can see, there's a conflict. Most people have mixed varieties in their pond, and so running it soft will benefit one, but will be detrimental to others. As such, somewhere in the middle, like, you know, is probably the way to go for a pond containing a mixed variety of koi. One thing of note, if you do have hard water, fish that should not have sumi on, such as a kahaku again in that example, will tend to throw shimmy in hard water. And again, a shimmy is essentially a very small black mark, and essentially it's sumi. So hard water tends to bring out underlying sumi, so a koi that in soft water would not get shimmy because the soft water doesn't encourage them, doesn't encourage the sumi out. You move that fish to hard water and suddenly that sumi develops and the fish throws shimmy. So from that respect, again, soft water is preferable, although obviously not essential. And at the end of the day, getting a shimmy on a kahaku, it's not, unless you're showing that koi to a very, you know, it's a high level of fish, you know, it's not the end of the world. But just worth noting that harder water does encourage that shimmy formation. Another aspect with hardness, with general hardness, is it's also very vague in the way we measure it. The measurements we get, basically the degrees hardness or milligrams per litre measurement that we get from our test kits, it comes about from the total of a particular group of minerals, of elements in the water. The total of those all added together gives you the degrees hardness. And so it's quite vague, because you could have a sample that's 100 milligrams per litre that could be made up of 95% of it could be calcium, then a couple of percent magnesium, and then a few percent of the trace smaller stuff like manganese, iron, etc. And the total of those could come to 100, where you could also have a sample that reads 100. But if you could break it down, it could actually just be, say, 50% calcium, 45% magnesium, and then, what am I up to? 5%, the remaining 5% of the trace elements. And so you can see that water has a very different makeup, but the measurement we get is the same, 100 milligrams per litre. So it is quite vague the way we measure it, and hence why I said at the beginning it is a really complicated subject if you want to go into it properly. But for what we need to know, generally speaking, the test kits will give you a measurement. Keep that measurement within 60 to 250 milligrams per litre, 3.6 to 14 degrees of hardness, and your koi will be fine. Higher end of that scale, harder water, more favourable for black sumi development. Lower end of that scale, softer water, more favourable benny, for stronger benny development. And lastly, just very briefly, I touched on, I think I mentioned clay, people adding clay to what they believe to replicate mud ponds in Japan, where actually that has the opposite effect. I've never been a fan of clay, I must admit. If you add clay to your water, you will increase your pH, you'll increase your hardness. And as I've said, they're not things I really want to do. The kind of clay takes your water away from the Japanese mud pond kind of water, so not something I want to do. Having said that, a lot of people do use clay and do claim good benefits from it. So rather than just kind of blindly rule those out, I have bought some Mediclay which I'm going to use. I'm going to put it in my pond here. I say I'm not particularly looking forward to it. I don't want to push my pH or my hardness up, but I'm going to do that. Several people have asked, and also I've been asked to look at that in conjunction with the Tempest filter which I run on here, whether the Tempest would kind of blind and block up with the clay, take the clay out. So I'm going to put some clay in and we'll have a look at that, and I'll measure my parameters and we'll see what effects it has on my water and how the Tempest goes with that. So that video will be coming along soon, so do look out for that. I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover on General Hardness, really. As I say, one more thing, just there is often some confusion with KH and GH. Apart from the term hardness in the title, in the name, they're not connected at all. They're two very different things, so don't mix the two. They are separate. Having a higher GH has no bearing whatsoever on the KH buffering capabilities, etc. So yeah, very separate. Don't mix or confuse the two. I think that is everything. If I've missed anything, I mean, as I say, I've missed a whole world of things, but that's deliberate. I'm trying to keep it simple. If there's anything I haven't covered that you would like me to do, please do let me know in the comments below, and I'll do that. Do check out my other videos, and if you like this video, if it's helpful to you, please do hit the like button. It all helps. And if you're not already, please do subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. And until the next time, take care and look after yourself.